What's up guys, Kudou here. Today we're going to talk about Monster Hunter Worlds. Yes, I realize I'm pretty late to the party on this one, but I did get it on release date and I have played a lot of it, so I would like to give my thoughts. So let's get the obvious thing out of the way first. The game, jumping from a 3DS game to the PS4, is absolutely goddamn gorgeous. So much time and effort went into making each of the different areas, the hub world, the character models, everything just look fantastic. They had to start over by texturing brand new models for all of the monsters, even the ones they're bringing over that have been staples in the series forever, and they just look fantastic. Even though the character models are a lot better, one thing I would like to see improved in the series even further are the human models, because there's something about the human faces that have never looked right in the Monster Hunter series, and for whatever reason, they still don't look that great here. But other than that, man, boy, this is a really, really beautiful experience. The gameplay is not a drastic overhaul of the Monster Hunter formula, but it still works very well. From a technical aspect, this is the best that Monster Hunter has ever been in its entire franchise. The maps have been completely opened up, and without the loading zones between each area, it feels so much better to just roam around, look for items, and look for monsters. Speaking on the looking for items thing, they finally got rid of a lot of the little dumb animations that used to be in the game, so if you're running past a leaf or something and you can pick it up, then you can just pick it up as you're running and not stop for 5 minutes and stare at it. Same with using items. For the most part, you don't even need to stop to use an item anymore. You can drink a potion or eat some meat as you're walking around. The trade-off being if something bumps into you while you're doing this, then you won't get the full effect of the item. You also have a neat little wrist gun that you can attach rocks or torches or anything you need to. I didn't find myself needing to use it as often as I would have liked to, but it's still really cool that they added it. You can grappling hook onto certain bugs, you can launch torches if you're in a place that's really dark, or you can use it to fire rocks or other weapons at the monsters. And the scout flies! The scout flies are definitely one of my favorite additions to the series. You have these neat little green bugs that will hover around you and help spot out anything in the area that you might have missed. They're especially helpful here because when you're hunting monsters, you no longer have to just remember where they usually are and then try and find them manually. You can normally look for tracks, splotches on the wall, different little signs to show that the monster has been there, and when you go up to them, it tells you how long ago that monster was there, and it helps you look for them. If you find enough of these tracks, the scout flies will be able to show you exactly where the monster is. You would think that this would make the game feel a lot more casual, but honestly, keeping an eye out for the tracks is a little harder than just looking for the monster where it normally is. It also makes the entire thing a lot less annoying, so good on them for that. Anything that gets rid of the stupid paintballs is a plus in my book. And while we're jerking off the developers over good item decisions, no more hot and cold drinks! Yes! Yes! More not hot and cold drinks! That decision was so good I almost forgave you guys for Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Almost. But that's not what we're here to talk about. This is Monster Hunter, so let's talk about hunting some monsters. Now, like I said before, this is the best that the series has ever felt. I love the feeling of having the controller in my hands. You get numbers now when you knock into monsters, and the numbers will turn orange when you're hitting a place that's vulnerable. The controls haven't changed too drastically from previous entries, but they have added some new moves to some of the weapons, and everything just feels really good. Weapons like the Greatsword, for example, got this neat little tackle that you can do into monsters, so you no longer have to keep putting your weapon away. If you want to keep it out and keep fighting, you can tackle into moves that are hitting you, and you get a few moments of invulnerability where you can clash with the monster. Not all of the changes were great. One of the things they took away from the Sword and Shield that was in the last game was weapon coatings, which I thought was really cool for a close-range weapon. See, in the last game, you could equip sort of ammo, almost, for your sword and shield, and it would give your sword some special elements, and it made the sword and shield a little more viable, but, that had to go for some of the cool stuff to stay. It feels a little weird to say this, but the weapons are almost perfectly balanced with each other based on what strengths they have, what weaknesses they have, and you can use pretty much anything you want to while you're playing the game. There are only 2 weapons that I don't think really fit this category. The Charge Blade is still clearly the best weapon in the game, just like it was in 4. It just deals so much damage and it's way too versatile. It's got a shield on par with the Lance and the Gun Lance, which are the best shields in the game. It attacks just as quickly as the Sword and Shield and Dual Blades, and it even has the files and big finishers of the Switch Axe. Really, the only things they haven't given the Charge Blade at this point is a ranged attack and the ability to jump. If it had those two things, it would literally be every single weapon in the game combined into one with all of the best qualities. You don't have a ranged attack, Charge Blade. Be still my beating heart, you poor babies. On the other end of the spectrum, the Hunting Horn is still clearly the worst weapon in the game. Now look, I don't care that you're the best Hunting Horn player in the world, okay? I know you're sitting there judging me for saying that the Hunting Horn is the worst weapon in the game, but let's just face facts with facts. Can you name a weapon that's worse than the Hunting Horn? Okay, let's continue. And look, I'm on your guys' side, alright? I wish it didn't have to be this way, but the Hunting Horn was balanced around the idea of being in a full party of 4 people. If you have less than 4 people, it doesn't get its full potential. If you do have a full 4 people, then most of the time people would prefer you just played something with great elemental, or maybe had status effects, or it's something more useful than the Hunting Horn. Honestly, balancing it would be the easiest thing in the world too. I don't know why Capcom doesn't do it. All you have to do is give it like a base power that each of the songs gives you, and then it divides it evenly among your party members. That way, if you're in a party of just one person by yourself, then you get the power that you would normally give to 4 other people. But if you're in a party with 4 people, then it takes that same amount of power and divvies it up among you all evenly. That would make the weapon just as viable in solo play as it would in online play. But enough belly aching. If you really want to use the Hunting Horn, then go ahead and use the Hunting Horn. It's not like you can't do it. I'm just saying, you deserve more, guys. You deserve a lot more than Capcom gives you. Online play is pretty easy. When you first log into the game, it puts you in a room with 15 other players, and you can see whenever one of them puts up a quest or something, you can search for specific rooms to join. Like, maybe if you're looking to hunt a specific monster, you can get matched up with other people looking for that monster. Then you can see when those people go on to quests and you can join them. There is also a new mechanic called SOS Flare where you can fire up a flare into the sky in the middle of a quest and other people can come and join your quest from pretty much any lobby. In fact, if you just feel like messing around and you don't really feel like continuing with your story quests or something, it's really fun to just go into SOS Flares and join random people's games. There's also something kind of magical about the netcode. I've joined maybe 40 to 50 lobbies through the SOS Flares. I don't think I've had major lag a single time. It might have happened once, but I don't think there's ever been anything so major that it stopped me from enjoying the game. This is a game where you're rendering a giant monster, 3 to 4 players, and this huge environment, and there's no lag whatsoever, but you play Street Fighter V, which is a room and 2 dudes, and that has lag. I have no idea what's going on at Capcom. Also got to talk about that hub world. The hub world looks amazing now. It's a gigantic town that somehow isn't annoying to traverse because there's a really neat little elevator system. Each of the major facilities is right next to the lift on a different floor, so you can go to the lift and pretty much teleport wherever you need to. You go to a different little hub world later on in the story mode, but all the stuff that's in that hub world eventually moves on to yours. There's a lot of little micromanagey stuff you can do here, like get bounties and go on investigations and all kinds of little stuff that I don't feel like I need to go into, but is there if you don't just want to hunt monsters all the time. And smithing, something we gotta talk about with smithing that nobody is bringing up. So when you craft a weapon, you put materials and money into it. And now in this new system, you can actually revert back any of the changes you've made to a weapon to get all of your materials back, but you don't get to keep the money. This is revolutionary for the series because now you can test out a new weapon by building a very powerful version of that weapon, and if you find out you don't like it, or if you want to go down a different build path, you can just revert back all the changes and build into something else. It's genius, guys. It's so good. You can also test out these weapons by going into your house and asking your housekeeper to take you to the training area. When you couple the training area together with YouTube videos from Gaijin Hunter and RX Gaming, then you have got yourself a new weapon mastered, buddy. And with the great variety of weapons, you'll want to keep 3 to 4 weapons you like on hand so you can switch between them and keep the game fresh.
Man, Kudou, you're right. This truly is the best Monster Hunter game ever made.
Oh, well, I mean, it's close. I wouldn't say it's the best Monster Hunter ever made, but it's definitely up there.
What? But what about all that stuff you just said?
Well, don't get me wrong, this is definitely the best framework that Monster Hunter has ever had. But in my opinion, you can't judge it based on an engine alone, you know. They were making a lot of great improvements and advancements in the series with Monster Hunter Generations, and they had to sort of strip all of that away and make the Monster Hunter worlds bare bones as possible so that new people could get in and enjoy it, and they could make sure that it worked on launch. So I definitely appreciate everything it did, and I think it's laid the groundwork for the future of the series to be really great, but I mean, Monster Hunter Generations, when you look at it just game-to-game comparison, did have a lot more to offer than this.
Boo, contrarian!
This is clearly the best Monster Hunter ever made.
You're just being different for attention!
Wait, no, you don't understand. I have legitimate criticisms. First of all, the story in this game is a load of crap, which is weird because I remember the stories in Monster Hunter 4 and Monster Hunter Generations being pretty decent. It starts out with a pretty interesting idea. These elder dragons are coming from other places to this one island to die, and you have to figure out the mystery as to why they're doing it. It starts off pretty epic with you climbing a mountain and then figuring out the mountain you're on is actually a gigantic dragon. But let's talk about this for a second. The elder dragon in this game kinda sucks. Okay, yeah, it's big, and the first time that it starts turning around and you actually get flipped around on its back in the opening is pretty impressive, but then when you actually get to the part where you fight this thing, it's one of the dullest fights in the game. You're just running around on its back hitting rocks, and I understand they had to do something like this because of how big they decided to make the monster, but does anybody remember the Darin Moran? That was a boss fight that actually felt big because you could climb on its back, it could kick you off of its back, it shook around, and you could see everything around you while you were on it. Then later in the game, when you're ready to make your final stand against this thing, it's this huge epic fight where it's coming towards you slowly and you're just bombarding it with stuff from a distance, and then once you're completely out of ammo, you run up to it and you have a fight with this thing the best you can. You can really feel the size and weight of it as you're fighting it because it just seems like this huge beast. With the Zora Magdaros, you just don't really get that same sense. You're essentially just climbing over an environment, hitting rocks, and that's all you're doing. You never get a sense of the Zora Magdaros while you're there. Somehow, after you beat the Zora Magdaros, the story only gets worse. Beating Zora Magdaros gets you out of the low-level hunts and into the big-level hunts, but honestly, that's not that impressive either. Get your first taste of souped-up monsters, but then the story wants you to start grinding for them. In past Monster Hunter games, there were specific quests that you had to beat in order to further the story. But here, as soon as you get into high-rank stuff, you have to start looking for footprints of special monsters. Quickest you could possibly find these footsteps, and you can only get these footsteps doing random quests like optional quests and investigations, is 5 hunts. So you have to go out and do 5 at the minimum quests, and at the beginning of the quests, go to where you think these prints are and hope to God that you find some of them. And here in high rank, we're talking like half an hour per quest, unless you have the charge blade, then it's like 15 to 20 minutes. And at the beginning of each of those quests, you gotta run and see if you can find the footprints. If you get through a quest and you don't find any footprints, or you only find like one, well, that was a wasted 30 minutes. Time to go get another one. It's so dumb. Monster Hunter is already a pretty repetitive franchise. I have no idea why they thought this was going to be a good idea. I could see maybe making a player do this once, like you have to do one optional quest and find these special prints and then you get the next story mission, but having you do this whole grinding thing is just a chore, and it's not even like it only has you do it once. It has you do it at a minimum of like 2 or 3 times. Also, for some weird reason, you can't replay story quests. I don't really understand that one, Capcom. You're gonna have to explain that one to me. I know someone's gonna try and say, oh, that's just to make it so that you can't grind the monsters for parts, but you can grind the monsters for parts. You can just do investigations and stuff. Let's say, hypothetically, I'm one of the people who thinks that one of the story missions was really epic, and I want to have one of my friends play through it without having to play the entire game. What do? I essentially can't do anything. See, there are ways around it. I could do an optional that's kind of the same. I could have them do an event or something. I could go on an investigation for roughly the same monsters, but that's just such a weird roundabout thing to admit. Getting off of the gameplay of the story for a second and onto the characters, I'm sorry to say, but the characters kind of suck too. None of them are memorable or interesting. Like, The leader of the second fleet kinda sorta gets close to being a memorable character. And the handler, baby, the handler. Like, I get it, Capcom. You can't strike gold like you did with the Guildmarm. The Guildmarm was pretty much perfection for this role, but the handler is just so pointless and annoying. I think one of the things that made the handler much more annoying than somebody like the Guildmarm is they have to follow you around and tell you really obvious things while you're playing the game. And this is gonna be a little petty, but she's kinda ugly too. Like, I'm not saying that I needed her to be some kind of sex symbol, but I feel like you could have tried to do something with her to make her a cool character. The gameplay improvements that Generations was making to the series are now gone. Now listen here, this is a little something we like to call a gray area. Even though I'm going to talk about a lot of these features being gone, I don't hold that against Monster Hunter Worlds. I think it was smart of them to make the game as simple and user-friendly as possible. But that being said, I'm also not going to ignore the fact that we've had a Monster Hunter in the past that technically had a lot more to offer than this game has. So firstly, the option to play as a Palico. Monster Hunter Generations added a feature that let you play as the Palico instead of just having one as a teammate. You got your own weapons and armor and skills, and there were a bunch of things you could only do as a Palico that you couldn't do as a human. Weapon styles. Monster Hunter Generations introduced the idea of having different styles for your weapons. Styles were a great step forward for the series because even if you and somebody else used the same weapon, if you used different styles, you were still different from each other. And you could also change your style whenever you wanted, so if the style you were using currently didn't work out for you, then you could try something else. Or maybe you just want to use a style that you think would be good against a certain kind of monster. And each style removed and added certain moves, so it felt different and fresh playing against each style, even if you were playing as the same weapon. Generations also had skills, which were special moves that only certain weapons could perform. Some of them were big, powerful finishing moves, some of them were utility moves, but they were all awesome. Again, these were ways to add more gameplay variety, which, unfortunately, is something that Monster Hunter suffers from. Once you figure out what the best combos for each weapon are, then it's really hard not to just spam them and win your matches. Like, you could switch to different weapons and stuff, but in Monster Hunter Generations, I could stick with the same weapon and still keep it fresh by switching out my skills and styles. Monster Hunter Double Cross, the follow-up to Monster Hunter Generations, was a game that added even more styles and even more skills to the game. Monster Hunter was moving in a direction that let each player feel unique in their way that they played their weapon. And sadly, that had to be stripped away to make this Monster Hunter as easy and accessible as possible. The story in Generations was also pretty decent. They brought back a lot of fan-favorite characters, and they actually added some flavor and depth to the story and the world. Like, yeah, Monster Hunter doesn't have the deepest lore. I'm not going to sit here and say that Monster Hunter is like the Final Fantasy of storytelling, but it really felt like we were going somewhere with these characters that I cared about. The portability is gone, which is something that the PS4 can't do anything about. Again, I'm not holding anything against it, but that is something that I can do on Generations that I can't do on Monster Hunter Worlds. And trust me, if that were the only problem in the game, I wouldn't even be bringing it up as a problem. But that, on top of all of the other problems I have, makes it relevant to me. The monster variety is completely gone. Everything's got two curved hind legs, they've got tiny arms, and they've got a T-Rex-like body with different textures. Yeah, all of them have different heads, some of them are birds, but all the monsters essentially look very similar in bone structure. In the past, we've had giant bugs and bears and monkeys. They played it very safe with the monster variety in this game, probably to make it easier. They could start with a very similar skeletal structure for each of the monsters and then just sort of add the textures and the movements and the hitboxes on top of it. Yeah, there are a couple of varieties that don't necessarily follow this, but you can't argue that the monster variety in this game is anywhere near as well as the ones we've had in the past. And while we're on the subject of variety, the armor seems to be pretty distinct, but really the weapon variety took a pretty big hit too. Over half of all of the weapons in the game are just recolors, especially early on. When you get later on, some of the weapons get a bit more variety to them, and honestly, the few weapons they have do look beautiful, but again, you do get a lot less to compensate for that. I know I'm harping on this game a lot, I promise I'll stop soon, but there is one more thing I do want to bring up. With how great the online is, I'm really upset they still haven't added like a marketplace or a way to trade monster items. If one of my friends agrees to come and help me hunt a monster because there's a part I need, and I don't get that part, but they do happen to get that part, I wish there was a way for them to just give me the part so I don't have to grind anymore. Especially with some of the later on weapons. Oy vey, you guys really screwed up the drop rates of some of the items you need for the later weapons. I know a lot of people's answer to that is just going to be go and grind, but screw you, okay? That makes the Monster Hunter problem of being a bit too repetitive even worse because you have to go back and hunt the same monster over and over again to get that 2% drop rate item. Don't let anything I've said here hold you back from wanting to get Monster Hunter World. Just keep in mind that I'm not comparing this Monster Hunter to other great games on the PS4. I'm comparing this Monster Hunter to the last Monster Hunter we got. This is still an amazing game, superb game, fantastic game. It's definitely a refreshing game to see, and I'm so happy that it brought so many people into the Monster Hunter franchise. I'm just not ready to call it the best Monster Hunter ever because Generations had so many more features and as a game was just more complete. It's kind of like comparing two houses. One of them is this amazing framework, obviously it was very well built, it's got very high grade materials. This other house over here, it's not quite as well built, but it does have a pool in the back, it's got a playroom, and it's got an observatory. When you ask me which one is the best house, then I mean, I do acknowledge that this newer house over here is built better. I mean, it's got great materials, it looks very sturdy, but the house over here, it's got all these features that this newer house just doesn't have. I'm still gonna say that this other house is better because it's got the rec room and it's got the pool in the back and it's got the observatory. If you disagree with me on this, then I completely understand, but I think we can both agree on one thing. The next Monster Hunter that comes out is probably going to be mind-blowing in how good it is. Because now that they've got the structure of how Monster Hunter is supposed to be down, the next one is going to have a great story, it's going to have some new features, and, you know, if they added an online marketplace, that would be pretty cool too. But I've been talking long enough. Let's get on to a score. Monster Hunter Worlds is a game that I think will live on until the end of the year. Unrivaled gameplay, smooth as butter online, and new events coming out every few weeks will keep this game fresh for a long time. I'm really glad I waited to do this review because when I first got this game, I was fully prepared to give it a 9 out of 10. But with how bad the single player was, and how many features we're missing now, and how bare bones the game feels, I think this game deserves a very solid 8 out of 10. See guys, it's still good, it's still one of the highest reviewed games on the channel, okay? Honestly, I think this game would be a shoo-in for Game of the Year if we weren't getting Smash at the end of the year, and if there weren't a small chance that maybe Kingdom Hearts 3 might be coming out this year. But I think for now, an 8 out of 10 is pretty fair. Thank you all for watching, and I hope I didn't make any of you too upset. And hey, if you still like me after this review, feel free to add me on PSN with my gamer tag in the comments section, and I will see you on Monster Hunter Worlds. Hey you, thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you left me a like. They help the channel grow and let me know that you want more of this kind of content in the future. The channel is currently being supported by these lovely folks on Patreon. You guys rock! If you have any thoughts on the video, of course leave them in the comment section below along with suggestions on what I should do next. But also answer this question to prove that you made it to the end of the video, if you feel like it. And finally, if you found this video by accident, then subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudou news. You can also hit the notification bell. Ringing the little bell will let you know when I upload a new video. See you next time!